about,
Excuse me. We are recording. I'm sorry.
that's okay. There. Yeah, so navigating the holidays with cancer, right, is kind of where our starting off point is. And just to give you a little bit of background on me, I did live in California for 25 years in the LA area, and I've been a psychologist for probably about that long, a long time. And um, when I was in Los Angeles, I worked really closely with a physician who was treating people who had addiction issues, primarily alcoholism. And because of that, I and other therapists that were colleagues of mine were very connected and attached with the recovery community. So we had a lot of patients who were dealing with recovery from alcohol, primarily alcohol. And that has really affected my practice. It's affected how I look at life, because the recovery community is incredible. The people who are in that and who are dealing with recovery from alcoholism, for instance, one of the slogans, so as a part of our practice, my colleagues and I often would attend AA meetings, Al-Anon meetings. We were very, very close with the recovery community. So my approach and often how I speak is from a recovery standpoint. And certainly that translates well to working with people who have cancer diagnoses. So one of the things that is extremely important in recovery, and I believe in just in working with patients, I work with patients who have cancer and also patients who don't, who have mental health issues, obviously depression and anxiety. But in the recovery community and in the 12 steps are just the tools for living. And what I find with when my patients come to see me is they're obviously usually dealing with a major life event, often a traumatic event, or they're dealing with trauma from the past. And they will say, I just can't cope. I don't know how to cope. Can you help me cope? And so coping seems to be such an important topic in life. Certainly with cancer, it's important. Navigating the holidays, it's important. But it's also just dealing with life. And one of the slogans in recovery communities is dealing with life on life's terms. So I think it's just important to kind of start on that note, and that being wise and we're, practicing resilience is just incredibly important as we navigate the cancer journey, and just navigate life in general, because life throws us curves. And as all of you know, if you're dealing with cancer, or if you know someone who's dealing with cancer, and we all do, uh, it's just one of the most universal diseases in our culture and in the world. So at any rate, just kind of the question of finding joy when life is hard. How do we do that? And really, what is joy? And I like to kind of make a little bit of a distinction between joy and happiness. They're kind of the same thing, but joy is really, to me, it's a deeper issue. Thoughts, feelings, and actions in regard to what matters the most to us in life. And so that can be finding joy around being authentic, finding joy in relationships with others, with intimacy, and being authentic and aligning with values. So when we talk about joy at the holidays, it's often not exactly just feeling happy, but it's joy and sorrow are, obviously two sides of one coin. And So it's just important to recognize that there's going to be sorrow and hopefully there will be joy this holiday season. It's going to look different with cancer. There's no question about that, but it doesn't mean that you can't have joy. And there is really no season quite like the holidays to spark uh, the pain of grief, loss, disconnection. And so, what Brenda and I have talked about in talking about this discussion today is how can we give ourselves permission to feel grief, to feel loss, and at the same time experience joy along the way. Um, because both emotions are so intense. So yeah, with that said, there are certainly different types of grief and loss, and certainly we all know the pain of losing a person, losing someone we love, um, and that is a physical loss. We physically lose the person, but there are so many other losses. And really, as a human being, we're dealing with loss and grief all the time, all throughout our lives. So I think we fail to recognize what these losses can mean. And for children too, like the loss of a pet or the loss of something really important to them or the loss of a friend who moves away. Um, those are losses that need to be grieved, but often in our culture, because we're kind of a grief phobic culture, we don't like to deal with grief. And that's actually uh, one of my focal points of my work really is grief and loss and dealing with trauma in a very authentic way. So, um, and Brenda, I know you and I have talked about secondary losses. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about cancer and all of the losses, secondary losses and symbolic losses that go along with that.
This is so true, Jane, because I think a lot of us here can understand that as cancer survivors, a lot of us are dealing with the loss of ourselves, who we used to be. And it's not just, I'm not talking about just the obvious, but for example, a lot of us have been through life altering changes to our bodies,
Mhm.
to our capacities, and we need to be able to mourn. I believe we need to be able to mourn those losses so that we can hopefully move on and
Yes.
be more accepting of who we are now. So how, Jane, can we mourn those losses? Maybe it's even mourning the fact that someone had to have a mastectomy, or I know, there's a lot of things I mourn in the person I used to be. I don't feel like I'm as sharp as I used to be sometimes, because of chemo brain and brain fog. Even 5 years later, I think I'm a lot better, but I'm still not the person I used to be. And so I wonder, what is your advice for those of us that have or are having those feelings and trying to adjust to who we are now?
Yeah. Such good questions. Mourning the loss of who you are, and which is really your identity, and going through the cancer journey, and also losing someone you love too. Say it's a spouse who has died, and this might be your first holidays without that person. That a change like that is very much a loss of your own identity as well. So I think, being authentic is it's just so important, and that ability, and it's not easy at all, but that the ability to try to be flexible in um, feeling the grief and feeling the pain, trying not to do things that are just shoving it away, like I'm going to avoid this, or I'm going to stay so busy that I just collapse at the end of the day and go to sleep. that's not healthy, but it's also not healthy to stay in grief for days or weeks at a time and simply not enjoy life at all. So, how do you do that? How do you find balance really um, in grief and in trying to find joy? So, it's kind of I like to use the word containing. All of us are containing so many emotions all at the same time, and with grief, if you can think of a container even as a physical thing, like a tote, and think about when you're feeling sad during the day or in the evening, you might have people over and you're thinking, well, I can't cry, right? Because we're all so afraid to allow those emotions in to let people see. But in all reality, people who are close with you, they don't mind if you're crying, and it's okay. And in that way, it does, it's a vehicle really for other people to support you. So I just want to encourage you in being authentic with your emotions and trying to find balance is even to talk about this in advance over the holiday season. Let people that you're close with know that, and if you are okay with this, but hopefully you are, that it's okay to talk about the losses that you've suffered, the cancer, the using a mastectomy as an example, just the loss of um, the identity, your image, your self image, as well as how you think other people are perceiving you. You might have experienced hair loss and weight loss. And it's really important, especially during the holidays, to prepare people for, and maybe you do look different. And so I think it's just the honesty and the openness, as much as you can do that with people and let them know, let them into your world instead of just trying to avoid the inevitable. You don't want people to be shocked at how you look, for instance. So just talk about it and don't be afraid to do that. Um, prepare people and prepare yourself, really. Um, it's so important right now during the holidays to kind of readjust, rethink, how am I going to handle this holiday season, given that I do feel a sense of loss, a loss of function. That's another secondary loss, a symbolic loss. You don't have the energy that you once did. You might need to take naps. Um, and take breaks. So it's finding that balance of being okay with grieving the losses, but also at the same time finding those moments of joy with family, with children, laughter. Um, uh, that's part of the adjusting, I think, and being very patient with yourself, very compassionate with yourself, because this is really hard. No one has ever prepared you for how to do this and how to navigate. But I love that word, navigating the holidays. It's like, I don't have a map for this. So I've just got to use some of um, my internal cues to let me know what are my boundaries here. And I know we're going to kind of get into setting boundaries in the next section.
Yeah, Jane, as we're talking about all of this, I think it's bringing to my mind, things that we all have to do to protect ourselves. As I said, I'm a 5-year cancer survivor, but I remember very well, very clearly, for example, during radiation, how unbelievably exhausted I was.
Yeah.
You know, they tell you you're going to feel this, but it really just doesn't resonate until it's hitting you. And I mean, you literally, it's like 3 o'clock and you're like, that I've got to have a nap.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so what are some other things that we can do? And I know, for example, we are going to get to the healthy boundaries, but what are some self-care things we can do for ourselves to help protect our energy and our emotions and those kinds of things?
Yes, it's a huge question. Um, and what it really boils down to is boundaries. And I mean, what are boundaries? We hear this word a lot now, and I think kind of back in the 80s, this term came into being in terms of, there are physical boundaries, there are fences, there are boundaries around our property. And we're all very familiar with those, but what is a personal boundary? Like, what is that? And why is it really important? And what it is, it's a symbolic kind of rules or limits that we create around ourselves to help us be safe, and to, like, when other people are around us, just to know like where we end and the other person begins. And knowing too, again, being kind of guided by that internal compass of when something doesn't feel right, that we kind of take a step out of the situation and just reassess in that moment. So particularly around the holidays, it's just so important to listen to, like you were saying, Brenda, you would be so exhausted, like you had to take a nap. And I remember when my husband's dad was in treatment for cancer and lived in a small town here in Nebraska, and people would come over, and there would just like visitors and people bringing food, and all those things were wonderful. But and no one had taught him about personal boundaries, but he'd be sitting there 1 minute, and then the next minute he would, if it were people that he was close with, he would just excuse himself, and he would literally go in the bedroom, shut the door, and go to sleep while people were there. And it was totally fine. It was appropriate. He was exhausted. And so it's like not pushing yourself so hard that you do just come to the end of your rope. And
Right.
it's really important. You are the only one who can set those boundaries and do for yourself what you need to do.
And maybe it might be fun to make kind of a joke of it. For example, I've got little grandchildren that obviously need to take naps. So I would just tell my family, hey, I'm going to be just like the little ones here. I'm going to have a scheduled nap time. You all talk amongst yourselves, and I'm going to go lay down. I'm going to go back to kindergarten days. Wasn't that our favorite thing to do during kindergarten, was the afternoon nap? I'm bringing that back. I'm going to resurrect that, just to kind of make it light of it, and let folks know, don't, if you don't want them to feel, I don't know, pity or that kind of thing, just say, hey, this is me now. This is what I need to keep going and keep enjoying being with family. But I'm just going to have to take a little time out here and take a little nap.
I love that. And yes, keep it lighthearted. It doesn't have to be so serious and like such a big deal.
Yeah, Cindy. Cindy has a thought she would like to share, Jane.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know how to wave my hands there. I know there's a button for it, but
That's
I haven't figured that out yet.
It's all right.
Anyhow, I appreciate the whole idea of having physical boundaries, but I think the biggest, the biggest thing that I'm going to have to deal with this Christmas is dealing with maybe emotional and mental boundaries, where my mother-in-law I will be with all of my in-laws, not by choice, but my husband thought it was a great idea that we travel on Christmas to go and visit all of his family. And I was not exactly for that. I wanted a nice, be at home. I'm terminal. I just wanted to be at home. And because I don't know how many more Christmases I have. But we are going to Virginia. And my mother-in-law, who is starting to have dementia, she focuses on my cancer and will not be quiet about it. Like, she'll look at me and just get tears in her eyes and start talking about, how this is so unfortunate. Sorry, my dog knows I'm upset. How unfortunate this is and all that. And honestly, right now I'm in a really good place. I'm doing well. And I'm doing better than she is. And so I don't want this to be a pity party. I want it to be Christmas. I want it to be enjoyable for everybody, because there'll be time for crying later. But right now, I just don't want to, I don't want to talk about it all the time. I want to be able to go and enjoy and not have to be, the focus be on me.
Yes.
So I know, like, I got together with them in July, and I would have to take times where you excuse yourself for a nap, but I excuse myself for mental health reasons, to just get away from everything and just take a deep breath and go for a walk. And but
Yeah.
anyhow, I just wanted to mention that, because I think that that is also a big part of it. If the physical part isn't getting to you, sometimes the mental part does. So that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, Cindy, that is just, oh, so wise. And you're absolutely right. Those emotional boundaries. And yes, when other people are focusing on this, again, you know, you're kind of having in the moment to kind of figure out what do I do with this? And so I think part of the self-care of dealing with the holidays is that planning and knowing now, if you go on this trip and realizing what it was like in July, it's like, okay, I know that this is where my mother-in-law is going to go. So just as you said, like taking a time out, you know, we talk about kids doing that all the time. And we as adults also need time out. So if you can't control, and you can't really control what she's going to be saying or doing, especially if she has dementia, because ordinarily I would say, well, try to talk with her in advance, and, you know, and just, or have your husband also join in on that too. And just say, you know, let's kind of do this differently. And, but with someone who has early dementia, that could be really hard to do as well. So I think for you, it's really being present and saying, you know, I would prefer not to talk about this right now, and then diverting attention. You know, it's really, really difficult, but I would enlist the help of your husband. And do you have children going too? Yeah. And so maybe even meeting as a family, and just, are you able to be open with your husband about that was really upsetting in July? Yeah. And so like a family meeting about it. And then you're also enlisting their support in trying to help you cope. Because again, it's, you know, you're coping with something that's really difficult. I don't know,
Jane,
Brenda,
yeah, Jane, I have a question, and Cindy, please chime in with this if you wish. And I'm thinking about if I was in Cindy's shoes,
yeah.
would it be helpful to even send out an email to the folks that are going to be there and say, I'm looking forward to getting together with you. I have one request.
Mhm.
I want to focus on having a wonderful Christmas with all of you, and I don't want the focus to be on my disease. And I
I've done that before. I've had a cancer-free zone where I'm just like, okay, we're getting together, but there is one rule. We don't talk about this unless I bring it up. So
beautiful.
I've done that before.
And you know
Oh,
what, Cindy, I
right.
think that's so helpful to others, because a lot of people don't know how to act, and they need a cue from us, and permission from us to say, oh, okay, she doesn't want to talk about it. I'm just going to treat her like Cindy, like the Cindy I've always known and loved. And we're just going to celebrate. I think that's wonderful to be able to give people that permission and ahead of time. And maybe in an email or something, it's even easier for them, because they read it and they go, oh, gosh, okay, I didn't know what I should say or how I should act or what I should do when I see Cindy.
Yes,
This is great. So
I love that idea.
yeah.
Yes.
So Cindy, you are so wonderful. I wish I could hug you right now.
I know, Cindy.
Oh, you're so courageous. But all of us as survivors, we have to be courageous, and it is setting those boundaries and expectations is, I think, so important in ways you can do that, whether you're using humor, whether I love the thought of rallying the troops around you.
Yes.
You're those closest to you, help enlist them to help protect you and your heart. I love all of that. I made the mistake of wanting to be the strong, independent woman when I was going through treatment. And I was very, very sick from the chemo. And I remember my children one time came to visit me at home. It was close to Christmas. And my son, he has a very sarcastic sense of humor, and he loves to trot that out. And normally I think it's hilarious, but on this day I was saying something about, oh God, I'm just feeling really miserable right now. And he says, oh, stop being such a sissy. I went absolutely off on him. And as I'm going off on him, I'm looking at him, and he's there with his sister and with her husband, and their eyes are all this big. And I realized, because I said, you have no idea what I'm going through. And I thought, wait a minute, he has no idea what I'm going through because I've never told him. I was trying to be strong and just, because you just think they don't want to hear about that. I don't want to, upset them. I want to protect them. Right. But that was doing them a huge disservice. And so it allowed us to have a conversation. And I immediately apologized to him. And I said, you know what, I just realized, of course you don't know. I haven't shared that with you. So I think the open lines of communication, as much as you're able to do, is very, very helpful, because of course, after that, my son, Jamie, he felt horrible. And he was more careful after that. But I also learned an important lesson, that I just needed to open my heart and let people in so they can help me. And that's hard to do. So that's
but I love that, Brenda. And that the part of that of being assertive and it's kind of like planning ahead. How do I say this? Trying to understand, like in your case, that people don't know the things that we haven't told them. And we make assumptions that, well, they should know what I'm going through, but they don't. So I love that idea. And that kind of goes back to this planning ahead and communicating, being assertive, being honest. And, there's a lot of talk now in therapeutic circles about asking for what you need, and not demanding what you need, but asking for what you need. But what goes along with that is that we don't always get that. We might ask for what we need, and then that it might totally fall apart, but it's still really important to ask for what you need. So Cindy, kind of back to your issue with your mother-in-law and going out of state. And, there's so many things about this that that feel for you probably like this is not really something you really want to do. So, and I don't know if you're able to communicate that and ask for what you need there. But yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about that too, that it's stressful when you're doing something you really don't want to be doing. And that's tough. And then dealing with people there who might not be respecting of your boundaries. But I do like the idea of enlisting your family members, and that helps them feel like they're part of the team too. Kids love to do that.
Yeah.
So,
even adult kids.
Yeah, even adult, that's what I mean. Yeah. Adult kids. Yeah. But Brenda's suggestion of emailing ahead and just saying, here's how I want this to go. And that's not being selfish. That's just simply asking for what you need. And you might get there and the talk, your mother-in-law might constantly be talking about the cancer, But then in that situation, then you can say, I need to excuse myself. I'm just going to go take a walk, and then do things for yourself that are really part of self-care.
Mhm.
And that's about all you can do in
Mhm.
a difficult situation.
It might even be a beautiful moment for one of your children if they're aware of how you feel about your mother-in-law. And I had two parents with dementia, and I understand exactly what you're talking about. It's like they get stuck. It's like a broken record, and they can't. And it's skipping, and they can't get off of it. And we have to understand, it's so disturbing for us. Imagine how it is for them. It's very hard, but here's a great opportunity for you to say to your son or daughter, if you see this happening, could you just say, hey, mom, let's go for a walk outside? So it's
Mhm.
not always maybe you excusing yourself. Maybe they dive in and help you a little bit and say, oh, mom, I need your help over here. Could you, so those kinds
Right,
of things.
exactly.
Yeah.
And also for people to divert her attention away from you. So,
Mhm.
ask her to take a walk, or just divert the attention. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully, Cindy, is that helpful at all?
Good. Good. So, Jane, do we want to talk any more about healthy boundaries, or should we get to some of the questions we've had from folks?
Yeah.
And actually, uh, about 3 or 4 of the questions all kind of revolve around the same topic. So we're gonna jump into that a little bit. So I'm gonna tell you the three or 4 of the questions that we had. My concern is being with family that refuses to vaccinate, even though I am at greater risk. How do I handle this? Family is family, and I want to be with them at that time. Another question was, due to the pandemic, when traveling to see family, how do you protect yourself? Another one said, I have periodically battled infections while traveling due to chemo and low immune system. Do I choose to travel or stay home for the holidays? And finally, someone else said, what kind of events can I attend during the holidays? Plays or school Christmas events, hay rides, walks and hikes in the woods. And I think that last question, they might have been actually referring to the pandemic as well a little bit, because obviously I think the answer Jane would give, and I would certainly give, is if it's more of a physical thing, well, you don't want to overdo. You need to protect your health and your energy. So a lot of times that's a personal decision. But what I do want to talk to you about is those pandemic questions. Jane and I, obviously, neither one of us is experts in that field. We kind of, we obviously kept on top of things due to the work we do, but we wanted to share with you an actual expert to help answer those questions. So I have enlisted the help of Dr. Ali Khan. And Dr. Khan, actually, he is Rear Admiral Dr. Khan. He is the Dean of the UNMC College of Public Health here in Omaha, Nebraska. He is an epidemiologist and doctor of medicine. He was educated at the State University of New York Medical Center. He has a joint residency in internal medicine and pediatrics and specialized in infectious disease at the University of Michigan. He has his master's of public health from Emory. He is the retired assistant surgeon general and former director of the Office of Public Health Preparedness and Response at the CDC. And he was there for, I think, over 20 years. He was the first to publish a national public health preparedness plan to improve local and state response to emergencies, which was used by the CDC back in 2001 during the first anthrax attack. He has responded to and led numerous public health emergencies, including the hantavirus, Ebola, and SARS, which is severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS is actually probably the closest to COVID-19 in terms of how that disease acts and replicates and affects the body. He is also the author of The Next Pandemic: On the Front Lines Against Humankind's Gravest Dangers. Ironically, he wrote that back in 2016. And that book predicted a lot of what is happening today. In that book, his fear was that the United States was not at all prepared for a national emergency, a national pandemic such as we're facing now. So obviously he was right.
Right.
So what I reached out to him and asked and told him about these questions, and his answer was very simple, because he said, you know, much as we've been talking about here, we cannot control the behavior of others. We can only control our own behaviors. He said, for travel and gathering with others that may be unvaccinated, he said, make sure you are triple vaccinated. So what he means is make sure you have your booster. I hope you're all aware, but I will let you know that, thank goodness, the CDC has extended the high-risk group, the group that is currently getting boosters right now as we speak, to cancer survivors, not just current cancer patients. I have already got my booster. So you can go and get that as soon as possible. And his recommendation is that you need to wear a mask at all times, except in well-ventilated spaces away from others, such as being outdoors. You remember somebody mentioned the hay rides and walks and hikes in the woods. Those are some times where you could get away without a mask. He is not recommending travel to Montana, Alaska, or Denver at this time because there's no hospital beds. And I will tell you that this was posted yesterday by Dan Johnson at UNMC. Currently, he posted this just yesterday, they have more COVID patients in the ICU than at any other time since winter of 2020. So this is the most they've had. They've got 136 in the ICU currently. Nearly all of them are unvaccinated. But still, there are breakthrough cases because remember, we're all coming to the end of our vaccination effectiveness if you haven't gotten your booster yet. So that's why it's important to get your booster now so that you'll be better protected. So that was his recommendations. And I know it's tough. I have the same fears. I did not get together with my grandchildren over Halloween. I made that decision because my daughter's mother-in-law came up from Arizona and she is unvaccinated. So I chose to stay away. And that was very, very hard. But I wanted to do that because I was hoping, you know, then I knew 2 weeks had passed between Halloween and Thanksgiving, and then I could safely gather with them at that time. So we all have to make our own choices and protect ourselves as best we can. Does anybody have any additional questions about that? I'll try to answer as best I can, but I just wanted to relay that those are the answers from the expert at this point. Okay, and so the next question we have, Jane, that I hope we can get into, which is another tough one, speaking of grandchildren. How do you explain to your grandchildren that are this person said, how do you explain to your grandchildren over 9 years old about your cancer and why you are sick and sleeping so much? And I think it's a great question, Jane.
That is a great question. Very, very poignant, having to be talking to little children about cancer, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best guideline and the best principle is to tell the truth in in a way that the child can understand, in an age appropriate way. And my close friend and colleague Lori Wingeter wrote an article about this for A Time to Heal, about how to tell children about your cancer diagnosis. And I think the question we got, Brenda, is from a grandmother, right? Talking about her grandchildren. But I think that this would pertain really to anybody who is needing to talk to children about cancer. You know, kids they are just sponges of emotions, anything going on in the home that is unusual or different, they're picking up on it. And it's just so important, again, in that spirit of being authentic and genuine that we were talking about earlier in terms of self care. It's also so important in caring for family to be the same way and to have that same spirit of being authentic and open and honest with them. Because anything that children don't hear directly from you, they're, and especially kids who are younger, like up to probably age 7 or so, kids in that age group do a lot of magical thinking where they wonder, is this my fault? Was I naughty and then that caused mommy or daddy to be sick, or Nana to, get sick with cancer? And of course, as adults, we know that's not true, but in a child's mind, they simply don't know. And they will often account for illness or stress in a family as being their fault. So again, just stressing the importance of being honest with them in an age appropriate way. So um, one of the biggest questions, if not the biggest question they'll have is, am I safe? Because kids are thinking about their own survival. That's just part of being a child, and they can't articulate that. But their question is, am I safe, and who will take care of me? So we know that hearing the word cancer, most children understand that's a very serious thing. So how can you tell that child that basically you don't, when you don't even know yourself, this is a very uncertain thing. You don't know the course of the treatment, but telling the child, I'm getting treatment. I have very good doctors. Mommy or daddy goes to the doctor and the doctor gives us medicine. This is especially for younger children. Um, and it's so important to name the cancer. So you don't say, I have an owie or I have a boo boo. Kids, certainly that's appropriate at certain times, but not for this. So it's important to name what type of cancer it is, right, Brenda? And
Yeah.
then,
Just my little grandson, I had to tell him because, he just wants to jump on me. And I had to tell him, Nana has breast cancer. And what that means is that this side right here, this area is very painful, and you have to be very careful around that.
yes, yes. How old was your grandchild at that time?
He was like, gosh, he must have been only like 2.5 years, 2
Mm-hmm.
time. Oh.
So, but even for him, you named it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And talked about the body part, in an appropriate way. And um, it's just what that does for a child is it makes them feel more secure. Because often parents will or grandparents will think, oh my gosh, I don't want to tell them because it will make them scared. What makes them scared is knowing there's something major going on. There are conversations behind closed doors. People are crying, people are stressed out and sad, and they don't know what's going on. So while they can't comprehend everything that's going on, but you want to let them know um, in as honest a way as you can, because paradoxically, that gives them more security and also makes them feel like I'm a part of this family. I'm a part of the team. Lori, in her article, talks about that we are a family, we are a team, and we will get through this together. So it's important for kids to have roles in that. And certainly, then kids, I think the question that we got was from a grandmother who is it a 10 or 9-year-old?
9-year-old. Mm-hmm.
So 9-year-old and up to um, being teenagers can handle more information. And so you can probably be a little bit more specific about what type of cancer it is, what the treatment is. But again, it's just that the child at whatever age feeling included and part of. Um, it helps them feel more secure.
Mhm.
So go ahead, Brenda, I think.
Well, I was just thinking about something else I've read that, you know, when you say about children blame themselves, I actually had a psychologist tell me once, children will imagine things far worse than what you tell them.
Yes.
Don't tell them. And that's so
Yes.
true. And one of the things we were talking about, you said children might blame themselves. Some children might actually think it's contagious. And
Yes.
doesn't that make sense in this pandemic era right now? They might think that. And then also, you know, I'm thinking about, Jane, that is it possible when I think this grandmother's talking about, you know, she's thinking about, I'm going to get together with these kids during the holidays, and I need to, you know, explain myself. So much like Cindy might do with her family is, you know, kind of planning ahead of time. Would that be a good thing to do as well for, you know, maybe to talk to the parents and say, hey, I'm going to set aside a little quiet time and talk about this, and I want you to be there because, you know, maybe that will help the child feel more secure as well.
Absolutely. Yes. Enlisting the help of other trusted people. Um, Great idea, Brenda. Absolutely great idea. And um, that idea about it being contagious, and especially in this age of COVID, you're absolutely right that especially younger kids can tend to think that, well, I'll get it, or other family members will get it. And so, again, just that idea of trying to reinforce. I remember it was somebody that I knew out in California, and she was probably 35 years old. And she was scared to be around someone who had cancer because she thought it was contagious. So, you know,
Wow.
that's kind of the extreme, but it definitely happens where young children can think, I could get it too, and I could die.
Absolutely. One other thing I would like to talk about, I've got my own question, because this
Yeah.
happened to me, and I know a lot of us here may be the matriarch, shall we say, of the family. Maybe it is always us that is the one having Thanksgiving or Christmas at our house, and that means, you know what that means, cleaning the house, decorating the house, doing the meals, doing all of this. Maybe that was your role for a very long time. And now
Mhm.
here we are, you know, just coming out of our treatment, perhaps. We are not who we used to be. We maybe don't have nearly the energy, and we're thinking, how are we, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But everyone expects me to do it. And maybe also there's a big part of us that thinks, well, if I do this, I'm still me.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
how, Jane, how does one kind of internally have a discussion with ourselves about that and be realistic about expectations from others in our family and expectations of ourselves of what we can and cannot do? And should we be doing it, or should we be trying to pass the torch to someone else? And how do we do that?
Wow. What a great, huge question, Brenda.
Yes.
And that makes me think of, again, a sense of identity. You know, if you've been the matriarch or the one who's had the festivities at your home, and it might just completely wear you out, but yet that's been your role. And so making these changes, as I talked about earlier, about being patient with yourself, it's really about setting the intention this year. And we're not talking about going way into the future, like forever and all time. This now has to be altered, but thinking about, how do I set an intention for this year? And again, going back to the recovery community and one day at a time, and some of these slogans that really help people who are struggling with addiction, the same things can help us get through coping with cancer, coping with the holidays, coping with change, because there is a huge change this year. There was a huge change last year with the pandemic as well. We had to come up with different ways of doing things. And while it's stressful, it's so important to be authentic and be honest with yourself, and then communicate that to family. Communicate your intentions that this year, and after you've talked with your spouse or other important family members, here's what we're deciding for this year. That gives the family more security. It gives them more comfort just knowing, okay, somebody's in charge of this. And it gives you that sense of self-care that I am doing for myself what nobody else can do for me, which is setting those boundaries, setting the intention. And in this case, it's about often lowering your expectations
Yes.
of what you can do and what you can't do, and simply being honest about that. Because if you try to charge through the holidays as you have in the past, and maybe that, maybe it worked for you, maybe it didn't, maybe you got so exhausted that you got sick. I have a couple of friends who would just barrel through the holidays and then in January come down with these awful, colds and respiratory conditions, and be sick for weeks.
Mhm.
So stress and the holidays, we just can't emphasize enough how important it is to this year set different intentions, communicate those to family. And just as we're talking about children, kids are going to want to know, well, why is Nana, why doesn't she feel well? And why is she so tired all the time?
Mhm.
Well, it's because Nana has an illness, and we're going, again, sort of reiterating some of the same things. We're going to the doctor, and the doctor's helping us, and we're
Mhm.
getting medication. But this year, it's going to be different, and we're going to have it at this person's house, or we're going to only do FaceTime this year. I think last year people had to do that quite a lot. So it's setting the intention and the expectations that are going to match what you're able to do, instead of just going through the motions, as if you're just expected to do that.
And you know what, Jane, I think again, the most important lesson I have learned through all of this is people want to help you.
Yes.
Your family wants to help you. And you giving them the opportunity to do that is a gift. It is a gift because they are sitting, you just don't realize they are behind the scenes wringing their hands because they feel so inadequate. They feel like there's nothing they can do to help you. So here's an opportunity for them, and here's the other lesson I learned. I remember that first year, everyone expected me to pull together the Thanksgiving. And instead of asking for help, like I should have, I tried to do it. And at the last minute, I realized I couldn't. So guess what I did? I called Hy-Vee.
There you
And I
go.
did their
There you
whole,
go.
right? And I did their whole Thanksgiving feast or whatever. And guess what? Nobody cared.
Right.
We had a great, because they're not coming because of your gravy that you make, even though they may love it and they'll tell you that, that's fine. They're coming because they want to see you.
Yes.
And that's what's important. So if you don't have time to decorate, guess what? Have the kids drag everything up and let them decorate. Have that be part
Yes.
of the fun. Have people bring dishes of food and let them do it, but just let them help. Let them help.
Let
And
them help.
I think that's the big key is we talk about being survivors and use a lot of terminology to be strong. And we are, but we, as Jane is so eloquently reminding us, we need to practice that self-care, and also we need to
Self-care.
open our hearts and let our friends and loved ones help us in a way they couldn't during our treatment, and it will make them so happy to do that. I promise you. And also, like you said, lower your expectations. If you have to go to Hy-Vee and get stuff, then you do it. No one's going to care. Just buy a lot of good wine. You'll be fine.
Exactly. I love that, Brenda. And I think what you're saying, be flexible, just learn how to adapt and respond from a place of understanding of yourself, what you can do and what you can't, and acknowledging that it's okay. It's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to go take a nap. So much of coping is in the mind. It's making up your mind that I am going to get through this. I am coping as best I can. And yes, allowing other people to help you and support you actually helps them feel more competent and confident in themselves, and allows them to feel like I'm caring for someone. And who doesn't love that feeling? We all love that feeling. So you're absolutely right about that. And be flexible, change things around, and in your mind, tell yourself it's okay that we get Hy-Vee. It doesn't have to be the homemade everything and the over the top decorations this year. And again, just as in the recovery community, when I was uh, working with people in recovery, it's one day at a time. And think about some of these mantras that you can adopt that will help you get through one day at a time. I can only do what I can do. I am strong. I'm doing the best that I can. And even, uh, some mantras that you can adopt for yourself, and some rituals like taking the time out to light a candle and just sit for a minute and gaze at the candle and do some really deep breathing. It will help you just kind of calm down and get refocused during the holidays when things are, it can feel very chaotic. So part of this whole self-care regimen that's so important for your physical health as well as your mental health is to allow yourself to breathe and to relax, and have times where you're laughing. There are going to be times where you're crying. That's okay. All of the emotions are okay. We need to give ourselves permission to feel, and give family members that same permission as well. It's okay to feel.
Jane, this has been so wonderful. I know there was a couple notes I have to kind of wrap up, and then we can take any final questions. But I believe, Jane, a couple of things that you said to think about is, what do you want your priorities to be this holiday season? Is your
Yes.
priority, are your priorities people, traditions? What are those favorite beloved things, and focus on those. And what is one step that you can take to help yourself be successful this holiday season? And if any of you want to share that right now, if since we've sat here and given you some ideas, if anyone wants to share, what do you think one thing you can do this holiday season to help you get through? If you want to share that, that would be great. Just if you can just come off of mute if you would like, and tell us what you're going to be doing, that would be wonderful. Or if you have any other questions.
Yes.
Everyone's being very shy. But we have just a few minutes left. If no one has any questions, then I guess we can go on about our Saturday and start making our plans for the holidays. And I want to thank all of you, and I especially, Jane, thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yes, thank you so
And
much.
I hope everyone has a good holiday. Enjoy to the extent that you can, rest and be flexible.
Absolutely. And if you're lucky like me, I ended up passing the torch to my daughter. So now she's the matriarch and not me. So I'm really happy about that. So
That's
it's all,
great,
everything's at her house and she has to clean her house and she and my son's girlfriend do all the cooking and I just show up with the wine.
All right.
All right,
That's fun.
everyone. Thank you
Yes.
all so much. Happy Thanksgiving to you and happy holidays, Merry Christmas. And we hope to
Yes.
see you at our next Create Your Best Life. We're going to be having that coming up in December. We actually had to postpone that. So watch your email for that. And we hope to see you there.
Okay.
Have a
Take
great
care,
day.
everybody. Bye-bye.